What's up, everyone? It's Ryan, and today we're here with the final episode of the division portion of the 2014 MLB preview podcast. And today I'm joined always by Ian. What's up, Ian?
What's going on, guys?
All right, so today we're going to start up with the Toronto Blue Jays, who last season finished 74 and 88 in the AL East, and they had a dismal offseason. They did absolutely nothing. They lost Mark DeRosa. They signed Dan Johnson, which I guess we'll talk about him in a second. They signed Diana Navarro since they non-tendered JP Arcibia. I forgot who he signed with, but I think we talked about it earlier.
He's out of Texas.
Um, and they basically absolutely did nothing. The Diana Navarro deal was for 2 years, $8 million. He's a solid catcher, so I mean, there really isn't much to talk about this offseason. So we might as well just talk about the team, and I'll let you go first, Ian.
Yeah, the Blue Jays obviously are coming off of a very disappointing season. And it was definitely disappointing to see them not do much in the offseason. I know they don't exactly have the most, I guess, like free money with a contract like Jose Reyes under their books. Um, but they do have a talented team. I think it's a question of staying healthy, which is something they did not do last year, and finding something getting something out of the rotation. It's a stacked lineup when you have guys like Jose Bautista and Edwin Encarnacion in the middle. You know you're going to hit for a ton of power with just those two guys. Lowry had a bad season last year along with Melky Cabrera. You had a lot of guys have kind of disappointing seasons last year, just underperform in general. Even Jose Reyes took a step back in the 93 games that he did play. But you do have another bright spot like Adam Lynn. So it's a team with a lot of offensive firepower. And you could definitely see guys like Lowry, Reyes, Cabrera bouncing back this year to an extent. So I think when you look at this team, you're going to have to look at how you think their pitching is going to do. R.A. Dickey got off to a rough start last year, but he did have a pretty good second half. Burley was, steady as always. He gave you a 4.15 ERA in 200 innings. That's pretty much what you can expect out of him at this point. But behind that, you didn't get much out of really anyone else. So I think something they needed to address this offseason was starting pitching, and it's something they failed to do. Because of that, I don't see this team being a whole lot better than they were last year, just because you need starting pitching in this league, especially in this division, which has three or four really good offenses, or really four or five really good offenses. So you need starting pitching, and they didn't really do anything to address that. So I think that's going to be their big downfall this year. Is just their lack of pitching. But Ryan, what do you think?
I think it's kind of disappointing. I've been talking about this entire podcast series about those Matt Garza and Nelson Cruz. Both of them, I think they would have been solid fits for pretty much any team that's kind of like a mid-major team. Obviously, Melky Cabrera, we don't know how well he's going to continue doing. I think last year, let me check real quick. He hit
You had
in
270,
yeah, that sounds
279.
about right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he had
yeah.
279.
Yeah, in 88 games played. So you don't have a giant sample size for that, but I mean, if he can continue that, that'd be pretty nice for this team. But I think Nelson Cruz could definitely be in an upgrade in left field, and then also Matt Garza. I mean, what is Matt? I mean, what are you going to lose from not or from signing Matt Garza? This rotation, it's a very weak rotation to say the least. Really don't believe in R.A. Dickey at all. I thought his Cy Young season was a bit of a fluke, and I don't know. I just don't like knuckleballers, maybe. I just really don't trust them, to be honest. And then also second base, Ryan Goins is your second baseman, and this spring I think he's hitting like it's like, let me see, 164. So that's your second baseman for the future, or at least for the season. So this team just needs a little bit more depth in the rotation. But like you said, this lineup is pretty much power packed besides Goins. But obviously, Reyes with the speed. Rasmus had a really nice year last year. Jose Batista will always give you over 30 home runs as long as he stays healthy. And Encarnacion belted 36 home runs, I believe, last year. I think Brett Lawry's going to get it back together this year. I really think that he's due for a pretty decent year, at least. I think he'd bring it over what he hit last year, 250.
Yeah, he had
Um,
254.
yeah, so I definitely think that he can definitely improve upon that this year. And I kind of expect him to. I really like Brett Lawry for some reason, but.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, basically nothing from this team this offseason. Really kind of disappointing. They should have gone after Matt Garza, in my opinion. He'd be a solid number two option on this team. So, really not much to say about this team. So, if you don't have anything to say, we'll go on to the offseason grades.
I do have two final thoughts. On the Dickey thing, I don't know I don't think he's going to be a Cy Young candidate anymore, and I don't think he can be your staff ace because knuckleball pitchers are kind of hard to rely on. But he did have a couple good seasons prior to his Cy Young season. In 2011 to 2010, it was pretty decent, and just based on his second half last year, I think he can bounce back. Maybe not to a Cy Young candidate, but to a good top half of the rotation type of pitcher. And on the Garza thing, I agree to an extent. it's hard to tell how much these teams value those compensation picks. Um, and I guess they fall in between the first and second round or something like that. I'm not really even too sure
Hmm.
exactly how it works, but it's hard to you can't always gauge how much certain teams value those picks. But I agree. I mean, I still think there were other options out there to upgrade the starting rotation that didn't even involve giving up a pick for a guy like Matt Garza and a guy like Ubaldo Jimenez. And even if you could make the compensation pick argument, but there's no denying that Garza would have helped this team out. I mean, it's a talented enough group that you could see them realistically making a run towards a wild card spot, but it's only if their pitching can step up, and without getting guys like that, I don't know how it's gonna. So, anyway, we can move on to the offseason grades, and Ryan, I'll let you go first.
I gave this team an F. They really did absolutely nothing. To be honest, this offseason I can really judge besides the Diana Navarro signing. But going forward, this team doesn't have too good of a future, it kind of seems.
Yeah, I gave them a D, a pretty low grade as well. The only reason I didn't give them an F is because Navarro over Aaron Sebia is definitely going to be an upgrade, even though Navarro hasn't really been consistent. He hit 300 last year in only 89 games, but before that he was 290 in 24 games in 2011 in 2012, and then the 2 seasons before that, really the 3 seasons. He hasn't played over 100 games since 2009, and he's a career 250 hitter, so I don't think he's going to keep up his 856 OPS that he had last year. But no matter what, he's going to be an upgrade over Aaron Sebia, who was god awful last year. Um,
Hmm.
so, I kind of liked that idea, and I also think I don't know what their payroll is like, but I imagine with some of the contracts they have on their books, they didn't have a whole lot of flexibility with certain guys. So, kind of understood it from that sense. But still, this team needed to make moves, and it didn't flat out. So that's why I gave him a D. And
All right,
I'll go. I'll
all right, you can go.
move on to the over under, which is at 79.5 this year, which is kind of pretty high for a team that won 74 games last year and didn't really improve a whole lot in the offseason. I can see this team bouncing back due to just guys staying healthier this year, but at the same time, they play in an extremely tough division, so I'm going to have to take the under.
Yeah, I'm definitely taking the under as well. This team didn't really improve much from last year. And like I said, unless they do stay healthy this year, they can maybe get over 80 wins, but I seriously doubt that happening. I'm taking the under on this one.
All right, and I'll move on to the Baltimore Orioles, who finished in fourth place last season, surprisingly, even though they won 85 games. Like I said, very tough division. But they finished in fourth place. They fell back to earth last after a great playoff run in 2012, or great, regular season run to a playoff spot in 2012. They won 85 games last year, won 85 and 77. They traded Danny Valencia, or to recap their offseason, they traded Danny Valencia, who played really well for them in the last month or so, hitting 286, for David Laff, an outfielder from the Kansas City Royals. They also signed Ryan Webb, who played for the Marlins last year, and he was sneaky good last year with a 2.91 ERA and more impressively a 1.2 WHIP in 2013. So he got a 2-year, $4.5 million contract. They signed Quentin Berry, Delman Young, and Alex Gonzalez, all the 1-year contracts, and they just recently traded Alex Gonzalez for Steve Lombardozzi. It's kind of a nothing trade in my opinion, but their bigger moves were signing Ubaldo Jimenez to a 4-year, $50 million contract. He had a really good second half last year after being pretty disappointing in his entire run as a Cleveland Indian. But like I said, he had a good. Sorry, I got distracted by something. He had a good. He had a good. I'm sorry, he hurts like through the wall. Um, he had a good
I'm
second
sorry.
half last year. He had a good second half. All right, but other than that, it had been kind of disappointing in the previous years. So maybe a bit kind of a bad
Jump at the
contract
gun.
for yeah, kind of a bad contract for a guy who has not really showed signs of consistency throughout his career. They also got Nelson Cruz on a 1-year, $8 million contract. Cruz, in 109 games last year before being suspended, had 27 home runs and had a 833 OPS, so he was really productive for them last year. They also signed Yohan Santana to a minor league contract and lost Jim Johnson. Tried to sign Graham Balfour, but I think he ended up failing his physical or something and ended up not getting that contract. So, anyway, Ryan, what do you think of this Orioles team?
I think it's going to be another pretty interesting season from this team. Obviously, it seems like now after that 2012 season, they're definitely going to be considered to make a run at a wild card spot. They definitely have the talent. Buck Showalter is an awesome manager. I just look at Manny Machado's health this season as a really point as how this team is going to go. I don't know how he's doing. Is he supposed to be coming back in week one, or is he going to be on the DL? I haven't really.
He's starting the year on the DL, I believe.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, if that knee for Machado is not going to be healthy this season, and obviously he had an excellent season last year, if he can continue this year with him and Chris Davis powering this team, it'll be probably a wild card spot, I would imagine, or at least pretty close to one. This division is so tough, though, like you mentioned earlier, so it's going to be really hard with that. And then also the Ubaldo signing, I really don't understand that, and I agree that a lot of their number three or four starters are actually their ace. And I don't know who their ace is this year. Who is it?
I
Chris
believe Chris
Tillman.
Tillman. Yeah, he's starting opening day, pretty sure.
So the Ubaldo signing, it's definitely an improvement for this rotation, but at 4 years, 50 million, that's 12.5 million a year, and he only got paid for like his last final 12 or 13 starts. That's just kind of a head scratcher for me. But yeah, he was going to get paid this offseason, and the Orioles were going to be the one who are going to be the victims of Ubaldo Jimenez, who was the curse of the Indians until the end of the last year.
Mm.
And then also in the Nelson Cruz signing, I really like that one. As I've been always mentioning, which team is going to sign Nelson Cruz really help them out. I think the Orioles really did that with signing Nelson Cruz. I like Nelson Cruz even though he did Peds, but I definitely think that's going to be a nice improvement for this team. And I think it's going to be a good year from the Orioles. They're probably going to be a little bit of a dark horse candidate in this AL East, and it'll be interesting to watch what they can do this year.
Yeah, the Orioles, I put in a similar boat to the Blue Jays in that it's an all-offense team whose big question marks come from their pitching rotation. And I did not like the Ubaldo signing. We've talked about it before where teams could have used that good number two, number three, number four type of starter. I thought the Orioles had enough of those guys. I don't think they needed another Ubaldo Jimenez on their team, especially one that's going to cost $50 million. They have guys like Chris Tillman and Miguel Gonzalez who have been good. Last year, Wei-Yin Chen was pretty solid for them as well. They had Bud Norris, I believe he's still on the team. He has another year of team control, and they also have some good young guys in the system like Kevin Gausman who came up. He struggled last year, but he's still considered one of their better prospects. And I don't know what the story on Dylan Bundy is. I know he missed last season due to Tommy John, and it kind of feels like another Miguel Pineda type of situation, but at the same time, we've seen Pineda come up this spring and actually perform pretty well for the Yankees, and he's already won that fifth starter spot for them. So we'll get to that later. But at the same time, they still have Bundy down there in their farm system. So I thought it was a team that really did not need another, middle of the rotation type of pitcher. I thought that was a bad signing, but it's going to be on the rotation once again this year, and their bullpen as well. Their bullpen was not overwhelmingly great last year. They could definitely see some improvement out of certain guys. I think Tommy Hunter is going to be the closer this year, so he's going to have to step it up. And other than him and Darren O'Day, he didn't get a whole lot of production out of anyone last year in their bullpen. So it's really not even just this rotation; it's this entire pitching staff, which I think is going to be the big question mark on this team. And if they perform and they back up this offense, which is one of the best in baseball, I think, then I think they're primed for another playoff spot, another wild card run. Or even, I don't know if I throw them in the division. The division race, just because it's such a loaded division.
You never know. You never know.
Yeah, but if their pitching steps up, then I think this team can really go far this year. So it's going to be on them, and as to whether their rotation can perform, that's still up in the air. But Ryan, do you have any other thoughts?
Nope. We'll go ahead and get into these offseason grades, and I'll go first. I gave him a B minus. Despite the Ubaldo signing, I do like it as an improvement to this rotation. And then also Ryan Webb, I think that's going to be a really nice signing for them, really cheap deal as well. I was just looking at his ERAs real quick, and in 2012 he did have an ERA of over 4. He was at 4.03. But before that, he had 3.2, 2.9, and 3.86. So you are getting a guy who seems like he can average at least about 3.4 ERA. So I think that's definitely going to be a nice improvement for this team. And Nelson Cruz definitely going to help with that offense a little bit more. That already has some pretty nice power with Chris Davis in it. So I like their offseason a little bit. Ubaldo signing, even though it was kind of a head scratcher, kind of a little bit of a lopsided deal, I think that's going to get really ugly. I'd still like it as an upgrade for this team, no matter how he does. So.
And I'll say something along with my offseason grade. I gave them a C plus. It was an okay offseason. It was kind of an if offseason. I don't know, or an iffy offseason. I don't know, how much better they're gonna get at adding guys like Nelson Cruz and Ubaldo Jimenez. But at the same time, with the Jimenez contract, it's one of those things where if you're paying a guy, um, what it was, AAV is like 12.5, I
12 and a
think.
half.
Yeah, that's not, paying a guy 12 and a half is different from paying a guy 22 and a half if they're gonna do nothing for you on your roster. So, although you can look at the contract in 4 years and think it's probably not going to be the best in baseball, but it's okay to have bad 1 and 2 year contracts. So I think at the same time it's not an egregiously bad contract. So I wouldn't be too worried about it in that sense. But I give him a C plus just because I don't see how these moves are going to make them too much better. I thought Ubaldo was the right pitcher. It was the wrong pitcher to add. And I thought Cruz, it was a good signing. I like Nelson Cruz. I think he's a good player. I just don't know. I guess they needed another right-handed power bat. I can see it from that perspective. But, it just felt like, 1 year, $8 million is fine, I guess. And it didn't feel like the signing that they needed to push them over the hump. So I gave him a C plus. And, yeah, go ahead.
All right, the over-under this team is at 81. And I'll go first. I'm definitely taking the over, but I don't think this team is going to be making the playoffs either. They finished last season at 85 and 77, and a 4-win decrease is definitely, I don't think that's going to be happening with this team. So that's an easy take on the over. How about you?
Yeah, I'm going over too.
I thought I was going to say something real quick, but
I'm going over too because I don't see this team being any worse than they were last year. Their Pythagorean win-loss was right at 85 and 77, which is the exact same as their actual win-loss. So, it's a team that should be right back kind of where they were again last year, probably kind of the outside looking in for that wild card spot. But I don't see Showalter's boys, playing under 500 balls. So I'm taking the over, and this is one of my more confident overs this season.
All right, so now we're going to be getting into the New York Yankees. Did you have something to say real quick? Or?
No, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. All right, so now we got the New York Yankees, who had a really big offseason. Obviously, they made some pretty big moves. So last year, Yankees finished 85 and 77, pretty difficult, disappointing season for them. Obviously, they had all that drama with A-Rod, so we'll get into this offseason. They committed $471 million in guaranteed money into like 3 or 4 free agents this offseason. So some of their big signings, they signed Jacoby Ellsbury from Boston, 7 years, $153 million. Obviously, Ellsbury had a pretty nice year last year, hitting 298. Signed Brian McCann, which is a very nice upgrade at catching because their catching spot was just getting really bad ever since Jorge Posada really started to decline, and then obviously when he retired. So 5 years, $85 million for Brian McCann, who's like 33, 34. So yeah, a lot of these guys in these deals are going to about their age 38, 39 season, even in the 40s. So really interesting. Some of these contracts could become a little bit bad towards the end. Signed Carlos Beltran, Mr. October, to 3 years, $45 million. And he and I were talking about before, he struggled in the second half of last season, but obviously the playoffs, he really helped himself out. And I think he definitely deserves that 3 years, $45 million. Obviously, their biggest signing, Masahiro Tanaka, 7 years, $155 million. And if you guys don't know how he did in Japan last year, he was 24-0, and his ERA was it was something ridiculous, but it was definitely under 2. I can't remember off the top of my head. Also signed Kelly Johnson and Brian Roberts to small 1-year contracts. They lost Curtis Granderson, Mariano Rivera, who retired, and Boone Logan, and they extended Brett Gardner, 4 years, $52 million. There's a ton of trade talks around him concerning trading him for, I believe, Brandon Phillips, but none of that obviously came to happen. And just announced today, Michael Pineda is going to be their 5th starter. So, Ian, and they also lost Cano. So, Ian, what do you think about this offseason?
It was definitely a big offseason. It's definitely a team that is, winging it and going for it now, which is the Yankee way, so to say. One thing I think you have to take into account when you look at these big, 5, 6, 7-year contracts with these guys. What we think of as $22.5 million a year in 2014 is going to be different than what people are going to think $22.5 million a year is in 2021. And it's just the revenue goes up every year. There's, typical inflation. I mean, contracts are getting bigger by the year, and you look at these long-term contracts that are, not necessarily backloaded. And most contracts are backloaded to a certain extent, but when you look at contracts that are, pretty steady throughout, that AAV is going to not come down figuratively in the future, but theoretically it kind of will, if you kind of get what I'm saying. And I'll use a perfect example of this. In 2000, or before the 2001 season, when the Red Sox signed Manny Ramirez, and I like to read a lot of old Red Sox stuff, and, all I ever hear about that contract was, oh, it was like this ridiculous, one of the biggest contracts in history, and like, they overpaid everyone else, or they outbid everyone else by like $40 million and all that. They paid him 8 years and $160 million. And I guess the second highest bidder was 8 years and 120 from the Indians. If you look at the numbers Manny Ramirez was putting up at the time, if you got a guy like that on an 8-year, $160 million contract, it'd actually be a pretty good deal. But at the time, $20 million a year was a lot less than $20 million a year is right now. So you got to think in terms of that, and that's a bit of a bigger gap. That's a 13-year gap as opposed to a 6-year gap with a guy like Jacoby Ellsbury, a 7-year gap or whatever. But I think it's something you have to take into account when you look at contracts like this. Other than that, obviously you can look at the Ellsbury contract and even the McCann contract and the Beltran contract and say those are going to be bad-looking contracts by the end of it. But I wouldn't have given Beltran that 3rd year, but I'm sure that's what it took to get him to sign. McCann is a guy that was one of the best catchers in baseball before he kind of ran into some injury troubles in 2011, 2012, and 2013. He's still a productive player, but he hasn't hit over 270 since then. He's had OBPs ranging anywhere between 300 and 350. 2011 he was still solid, but ever since 2012 and 2013, not quite the same player that he was beforehand. But he was still a good player last year. He's definitely going to be an upgrade. They had one of the worst catching production They had some of the worst production out of that catcher spot last year out of anyone in baseball. And I think a lot of people like to focus on the improvements with this team. I think you can't discount the fact that they lost the greatest closer of all time. It was still pitching like one of the best or second best closer in baseball. And they also lost Robinson Cano, who was arguably the second best arguably the best second baseman in baseball. So I think when you focus on this team's additions, you have to also focus on this team's subtractions. And I think that's big. As for Masahiro Tanaka, I have no idea what to think of that contract. It's probably too much, but who the hell knows? I've never seen the guy pitch, and frankly, no other casual baseball fan has, or even people I think of like my level of fandom. I've never seen a pitch, and so haven't a lot of people. So I know it's hard to kind of judge that contract and make opinions on that guy yet. So other than that, I like the Gardner extension. I think he's a pretty good player. He's 32, I think now, or 31, maybe 30. I don't even know. He's in his 30s, but he's a pretty good player. I like that contract. And I like that Pineda is winning the 5th starter spot. I think him, Nova, Sabathia, Kuroda, and I guess who's the other starter I'm missing?
Tanaka.
Oh, Tanaka, right, of course. I think you can actually form a pretty solid rotation out of those guys, the way Pineda's looked. I think Nova's going to have a good year. I think Kuroda and Sabathia could be steady, and who knows what Tanaka's going to do. But nonetheless, he's looked pretty good. He's looked solid this spring. So, it's a team that I could see going a lot of different ways. Age is going to be an issue at some point. But at the same time, it's a lot more talented of a team than last year's group. And they do get Mark Teixeira back, who was hurt most of last year. But Ryan, what do you think about this team?
I'm going to touch on that thing about Tanaka real quick. This spring, obviously spring training doesn't matter, but so far he has a pretty decent 15-inning pitch. I can't talk right now again. 15 innings. I know. I'm just a little bit rusty, man. It's been a while.
Yeah.
So this spring, 15 innings pitched, ERA of 3, 16 Ks, and only 3 walks. I think that's actually pretty solid, obviously. Obviously, it's only spring training. We'll see during the regular season. But so far, so good for Tanaka. Now, the only issue I have with this team is obviously third base, shortstop, and second base, because I really don't believe in Derek Jeter, obviously, in Teixeira's final year. Mariano Rivera's final year, he was lights out. I think Derek Jeter's injury might be lingering a little bit. Obviously, he's getting up there in age. Like, what is he? I don't know why I don't remember this off the top of my head, but he's like 37, 38.
Yeah, he's old.
So, yeah, definitely. And just that injury might not be healing fully. Obviously, we don't know that. Obviously, he might not be saying, my ankle's still hurting. He's not going to tell everyone that. But, yeah, this is his last season, and hopefully he can produce. He's been one of the icons, and it'd be nice to see him produce, but I just don't think he would because this spring he's hitting 128, and even though spring at bats don't matter, whatnot, but still that's just not a good showing to really have when you're coming back from an injury. But just this middle part of the infield, their base, shortstop, and second base is really going to become an issue, I think. Even though I think the rest of this lineup can really compensate for that. I mean, your third baseman's Kelly Johnson, your second baseman's Brian Roberts, and Derek Jeter. Depending on how well he does, if he can actually hit above 260, I think that's all they're asking for him. But I don't know if he's going to be able to provide that. And definitely his defense at shortstop is going to become an issue. So I just look at this team. I think that the starting pitching is set. The bullpen is going to be all right. It's going to be interesting to see how they cope with losing Mariano Rivera. But this offense, I think, is really going to carry this team. A lot of these new signings are just going to plug right in. It's just the Yankees. They just buy their way back in the postseason. It's typical, but it sucks. And I just think that Brian McCann, that signing is really going to help him out a lot as well. He can provide at least 20 home runs this season, I would assume. So that'd be a very big upgrade for them from last year. So, else to talk about them?
Yeah, I just a couple quick thoughts. One thing I want to touch on is the DH thing. I hear a lot about guys like, oh, well, Jeter will get time at DH, and Beltran will get time at GH, and McCann's going to I mean, I don't know where they're going to find all these spots if you need guys getting days off the field like that. McCann's a good candidate to DH because you want his bat in the lineup as much as possible, but obviously you can't catch 162. So you're going to need to, get him in there at times. Beltran can't play 150 games in right field because, as you touched on last year, I guess right field, because as you touched on, he wore down in the second half. He had 217 in September, and even in the World Series, he kind of just looked tired at that point. He's an old guy, and he can't play 150, 160 games in right field at this point. So you're gonna need to give him either days off or days, at DH, and Jeter is gonna be awful in the field this year. He's been overrated for his career as a defender. He doesn't have great range. He makes nice spectacular plays on balls that would be kind of just average plays for a good defensive shortstop. And now that he's had ankle problems and he's old, his defense is not going to be a plus at all, and you need defense out of that spot. So other than that, their infield's pretty terrible. Although obviously, I guess the jury's out on A-Rod.
Teixeira.
Teixeira's I don't know. I don't know if I was going to bounce back. He wasn't great. He's declined every year since he got that contract. And he wasn't great in 2012. He only had 251. He had an 807 OPS, which is good, but not great. And his OPS has gone down every year since his first year in New York, or even his year in LA. But and then I don't know what you're going to get out of Brian Roberts and Kelly Johnson. And I know that everyone kind of hates A-Rod at this point, but it's hard to ignore he was productive for the team last year in his 40 or his 58 games that he played. Or no, he had 44 games. So it's a team that I don't think their defense is going to be any good if they're trotting out Alfonso Soriano and Carlos Beltran and Derek Jeter and whoever. I guess Gardner's going to play center. That's not a very good defense. And it's a team that has a lot of guys that are going to need days off and stuff like that. I mean, they have a decent bench with a guy like Etros, their fourth outfielder, but they don't have anyone in the infield. They're going to get really bad production out of a lot of their infield this year, I think. So it's definitely a team with holes, but I have more faith in their pitching than most, so I guess that kind of makes up for it. But anyway, that's all I had to say. Do you want to move on to the off-season grades? And
We'll go ahead to that.
I guess I'll go first.
Yeah.
I gave him a C plus. It was a splashy offseason, but like I said, they did have some big losses. And even losing A-Rod, I think, is actually a big deal because he was, like I said, a productive player for them in the games that he played. He had a 771 OPS. He had a 348 OBP. So I think even though, everyone hates the guy, and you can't blame him, I mean, I'm not a fan of him either, but he was a productive player. I'm not trying to make it sound like I'm a fan of him. I'm just kind of stating facts here. So they lost him. They lost Cano. They lost Mariano. They lost Boone Logan, which I think not a lot of people are talking about, but he's another piece out of that bullpen that they're going to miss this year. So I think it's a team that had a lot of additions, but also had a lot of losses. And I think, it was a splashy offseason, but I think it was a little bit overrated. So I gave him a C+.
Ian made me change my grade from A minus to B plus. I have to agree with that. Losing some of those guys in the bullpen, that's definitely going to hurt. But I think just the signs that they made this offseason are really going to make them a lot better for this year. Even though in the future these contracts may become a little bit a little bit of a burden on them. So I think that they made the right moves. They made the Yankee moves like they always do, just shelling out a lot of money for just a bunch of guys. And obviously, the Tanaka signing, it's going to be interesting to see how he can do. But if he performs very, very well this year, obviously they're going to look very good for signing him. So I give him a B plus. Pretty good offseason from him. Just shelling out a ton of money though.
And we'll go on to the over under. Ryan, why don't you go first?
I'll go. I'll take the over on this over under. Last season they finished 85 and
It's at 88,
77.
by the way. No one mentioned that yet.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. Um,
My bad. My
that's
bad.
all
My
right.
bad.
But keep going.
It's at 86 actually.
Oh, really?
So
I keep looking at
yeah.
the Red Sox. God damn it. Dude, I messed up on the Google Doc. God damn it.
Oh
All
god.
right, keep going.
All right. All right, but I'm taking the over on this. I don't see that they're really gonna. I mean, it's only a one game improvement, but I think they're gonna do a lot better than that. They'll probably. I think they're gonna win this division this year. To be honest, I think the pitching staff is gonna be pretty good this year, and it's really gonna help them carry this whole team. So I'm taking the over on that.
I'm going under. Like I said, I think it was a splashy offseason that was a bit overrated. Also, people compare it a lot to the 2009 offseason. After it was a similar situation, they missed the playoffs the year before, went out, got a bunch of big name players, ended up winning the World Series the next year. They signed guys like CC Sabathia and Mark Teixeira. No one that they signed this year is as good as either of those two guys. So you're not going to get the same impact out of the new guys. And also, like I said, I think they lost a lot of key players. So I don't see this team being a whole lot better than they were last year, quite frankly. So I gave them I'm going under on this, under 86. And I guess I'm up next. We got to talk about the Tampa Bay Rays. My pick to actually win the division this year. Spoiler alert. And I'll get into why I like this team so much this year. But they had a kind of quiet, but it was a very typical Rays offseason looking for value out of players. Guys that, Madden thinks he can fit into a system. I think the biggest, well, actually, I'll touch on that last. But they re-signed David DeJesus, who ended up, for the total season, only had a 247, 327, 397 slash line with a 724 OPS. But in the final 35 games, he had 104 at bats with Tampa Bay, and he ended up hitting 260 in those at bats with a 741 OPS. And is pretty good against righties. He had a 772 OPS against righties. He was used mainly in the platoon at the end of the year with Desmond Jennings in center field, and I believe that platoon will continue again this year. He got a 2-year, $10.5 million contract. That's a very similar contract to the contracts of Rajai Davis and Johnny Gomes, two other guys that have signed contracts in recent years to be platoon outfielders. So right in that mark, and I think you can expect that out of him again this year. They ended up losing Kelly Johnson, Luke Scott, Jose Lobaton, Delman Young, Fausto Carmona, or Roberto Hernandez, Fernando Rodney, Alex Torres, Jamie Wright, and Wesley Wright. So they lost a lot of big bullpen arms, but at the same time, they traded for Heath Bell, a guy who's had success in the past, but has also struggled in recent years, especially with Arizona and Miami. They also traded for Ryan Hannigan, who was terrible last year, but I think he's a career 350 OBP guy and is a very good defensive catcher. So I think that was the right move. That was a guy I wanted the Red Sox to look into a little bit, since it was kind of pretty much known they weren't going to re-sign Saltalamacchia. But I like Hannigan as a player. I think that was a really good trade. They also signed Grant Balfour to the bullpen. He had 38 saves last year with a 2.59 ERA and a 1.197 WHIP. And they also traded for Logan Forsythe and Brad Boxberger. Boxberger, again, will kind of help aid that bullpen after they had some big losses. And Forsythe, I don't know what they're going to do with him, but I'm sure he'll become another one of these platoon guys that Madden uses, and he'll probably hit 410 against the Red Sox or something. Anyway, and then I wrote this in the Google Doc. I think the biggest addition for this team is getting full seasons out of Will Myers and Chris Archer, as well as hopefully Alex Cobb and Matt Moore if those guys stay healthy. And people forget, but David Price also went in the DL last year with back spasms, I believe. Or not back spasms, but he had a back issue. And when he came back in the second half, he looked like his old Cy Young self. So I think if he returns to form, getting full seasons out of all those guys and getting improvements out of all those guys, I think it's enough to make this actually a pretty big improvement over last year's team, which is why I think I like them so much. They went 92-71 last year. They won that playoff game, the one-game playoff with the Texas Rangers to clinch that second wildcard spot. So it's a team that I just really like to make improvements as a young team with a strong group of young core players. I also think can't remember if Longoria missed time last year, but Ryan, go ahead and share your thoughts on the team.
Well, my thoughts on this team is that I just think it's going to be a great year from them. Obviously, Joe Madden, I think he's arguably the best manager in baseball right now. And he just knows how to get the most out of all these guys. He has all these crazy shifts, and he has just all these platoons that he uses, and just he gets the most out of these guys. And I think that if Evan Longoria can stay healthy this entire season, he's an obvious, easy MVP candidate. I would expect nothing less from him. But also Desmond Jennings, the former top prospect, he's came up. He sucked past couple of years. I think he only hit like 250 last year.
Yep.
I could point to him as a guy who really needs to start picking up this year. Obviously, he has a ton of speed, but he just hasn't been able to get on base yet. So it's gonna be. I mean, we're gonna have to see how he can do this year. Also, the Logan Forsythe. I like Logan Forsythe. I just like him as how he's going to be used in Joe Madden's kind of offensive scheme that he uses or whatever. All these little things he does. So I also like getting that. And just the rotation is probably one of the most underrated, it seems like, just because a lot of these guys, a lot of people don't talk about, just because of some of the injuries that have happened to him, like Cobb. I know Matt Moore missed like a couple months last year after he started the season really, really hot. Chris Archer, he had a great second half last year when he came up. Hellickson, who is actually injured right now, but
He's
if
done
he
for
can
the
get
year, I
back
think.
in, like,
I think he's
what?
done.
What's that?
I think he's done for the year. I think I
Well,
heard.
so it
Hold
says he's out. He's out until late May, but I don't know. But yeah, obviously Hellickson won the Rookie of the Year in 2012, and
on. Oh yeah,
I
you're
don't know
right.
if he can come back sometime this year and make a contribution, that'd be good. But I know Jake Odorizzi has that fifth start or the fifth starter spot, so this team just has a ton of depth at that rotation, like they always seem to do every single freaking year. So. I think also what we should talk about is if they should trade David Price or not, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Then obviously getting Grant Balfour and Heath Bell, that is going to replace your Fernando Rodney loss. Both those guys can close. So if Balfour tends to struggle this year, you can potentially put in Heath Bell, but Heath Bell really hasn't been the same ever since he left San Diego. And also, just one more thing, like just like what you said, Will Myers playing a full season. Obviously, he had a great year last year, and if he can continue that success of this team, there's no reason that this team can't win the division this year. So let's talk about David Price.
Actually, I have
If
a
they're, if
couple.
they're,
I
if,
Yeah, I have a couple of
okay.
final race thoughts. I didn't get all of them out my original kind of spiel, but yeah, you touched on Desmond Jennings, a guy that's been a bit of a disappointment. At the same time, he hit 299 with an 857 OPS last year against righties.
Always got to
And
prove me wrong.
yeah, and if he platoons with DeJesus in center again, you're gonna get great production out of that center field spot for two guys that aren't gonna cost a lot and aren't gonna really be big names or make headwaves. But at the same time, that's just classic Joe Madden, getting the most out of his guys, putting them in situations to succeed. Um, and other than that, like you said, if you look at this pitching staff, if they get full seasons at a Price, Moore, Cobb, and Archer, that's one of the best pitching staffs in baseball. As always, that bullpen will be pieced together. And I think Jake Odorizzi won the fifth starter spot. So that's a good sign. He's a former top prospect who regressed a little bit in his time with the Royals. Ended up getting traded in the James Shields trade. And, let's see if he can finally live up to those expectations. At the same time, Balfour, Peralta, Jake McGee, and all those guys that they still have out there in that bullpen, that should make still a pretty solid bullpen. And other than that, it's just a good young team that I think more so than the offseason additions that they got. I think it's just getting full seasons out of some of the guys that I mentioned that is going to be the biggest improvements out of this team. But Ryan, why don't you go on to your David Price stock?
So I was, obviously the biggest thing about this offseason, and especially with the winter meetings, was the buzz around David Price and if he would be traded. Obviously, some of the teams that were involved with that was the Seattle Mariners, who I really thought should have gone after David Price if they wouldn't have gone after a bat, which is, I think, their most pressing need is to help out Robinson Cano in that lineup. But having David Price in your rotation is absolutely not a bad thing at all. So I'm going to present this to you. If the Seattle Mariners offer you Taijuan Walker, Nick Franklin, who the Rays have been coveting all of this spring training, they've been wanting Nick Franklin so bad. If they offer you Walker, we'll throw in Holtz in, we throw in Nick Franklin, would you take it?
That would be very tough to turn down. It's probably going to be hard to get a better offer than that for a guy like David Price, especially because he's free agent eligible after the 2016 season, and as you lose those years of team control, you lose leverage as a team that's trying to sell a guy like David Price, and then he has less value as well because those years of team control are very valuable, especially for a guy who's going to get a massive goddamn contract when he hits free agency. But at the same time, I think I gotta wait because for one, and I guess with your hypothetical trade offer, this doesn't really matter. But you would be kind of selling low on a guy because he had a back problem last year, and his numbers were a little bit down from his 2012 Cy Young season. Ignoring that hypothetical trade, I think in general, if you're trying to trade a guy like this, you're selling a little bit low on him. I have confidence that he'll bounce back this year if he stays healthy. And at the same time, I really think this Rays team is primed for a World Series run. I don't know if I am going to pick them. I'm not going to spoil anything, as we'll get to that in our podcast on Sunday. But I guess that would be tomorrow when this goes up. But I just think this team is going to hit its stride this year. I think you got guys coming up at the right time. You got guys improving. You got guys like Longoria and Price entering their primes. I think this team is good enough to win a World Series, quite frankly, this year. And I don't think you sell that at this point. The whole idea of selling a guy like this is to build up for a window of 2 years or something like that, to go after a World Series title. I think this is the beginning of the Rays window. And I don't think I sell that at this point. I think I wait. He's not going to be a free agent until 2016. You have years to trade him. You have the next offseason, and then I guess the deadline before that even. Actually, I don't know, because I think he has maybe even 2 more full seasons. Or I don't even know how exactly it works. I think he might have 3 more full seasons of team control, which is crazy to think about. The guy seems like he's been up for goddamn forever.
Yeah.
So at the same time, I'm waiting to trade him. Unless I get some crazy offer that's going to give me, maybe a major league ready starter back or something like that, like a proven starter back. Because I think this team is just kind of hitting its stride at this point. I think they're going to prime for a World Series run, and I don't think you sell at that point. I think you got to wait a little bit longer. Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, I would definitely turn down that offer. Just looking at this rotation headed by David Price, you got Alex Cobb, who he had a great second half of the season after he got hit in the head by that line drive, which is just gruesome. But just this rotation is full of a ton of really good starters. Alex Cobb, Matt Moore, Chris Archer, Oda Rizzi, even. All of these guys are just going to be so good. They're all above average, quite frankly, and they're like way above average, especially Moore, Cobb, and Price. So yeah, I would have to say no. I would have to wait until maybe next year, unless this season just turns into a disaster. If they're below 500 in July, and you do get like an offer involving Taiwan Walker, who I think could eventually become a staff ace. But obviously, prospects, you don't know that. That's just assumptions. But I don't know. I would have to definitely think about it for a while. It'd be a really tough decision. But just depending on how the team's doing, I'm definitely going to say no either way and wait until this offseason or maybe even next season. So if you don't have anything else to add, we can go into the offseason grades.
Yep, go for it.
All right, so I'll go first. I give them a B minus because I think that these moves weren't really big, but it's just the Tampa Bay Rays doing what they're doing best. They're just bringing in guys to help out what Joe Madden wants to do, and I also like the bullpen moves with getting Heath Bell and Grant Balfour replacing Fernando Rodney, which I think those guys are both going to be improvements over Rodney anyways. But yeah, I gave them a B minus.
Yeah, I gave him a B. Kind of the same range. Obviously, the Rays are never one to go out and sign big $150 million players, just because they're working on a tight budget. But at the same time, I liked the value players that they brought in. I loved the Hannigan trade. I think bringing in a guy like Heath Bell for what they got him for, I think. Just because he's a guy that has proven in the past that he can perform at a high level, and you get him in the right system, I think he can rebound. I also liked getting Grant Balfour and Brad Boxberger. I think they pieced together this bullpen nicely this year. And at the same time, I think their biggest offseason acquisitions weren't even acquisitions. I think it's just getting full seasons out of some of the guys that came up last year, and some of the guys that got hurt. So I think at the same time, it wasn't a splashy offseason, but I think it was a pretty productive one, and I'd be pretty happy if I was a Rays fan moving forward. Ryan, why don't you go first on your over-under for this team?
All right, the over-under in this team is at 89, and I'm taking the over, but I almost want to take like an even on this team. I definitely think that as long as everyone stays healthy, though, they're going to win at least 90 games this year. Obviously, getting full seasons out of Price, getting full seasons out of Cobb, Matt Moore, Chris Archer, and if you throw in Will Myers, this team is going to be really good this year, and I agree, definitely could make a World Series run if they get in that playoffs. They're going to wreak havoc this year on the playoffs. So I'm taking the over on that.
Yeah, I'm going over too. It's every year the old joke is you always take the over on the Rays because they're always so undervalued, and they always just play. It seems like up to their potential. And I think this year they have the potential to win 95, anywhere between 95 and 100 games. Quite frankly, that's how much I think of this team. So their over-unders at 89. I think they're going to be in the 90s, so I'm taking the over.
All
And
right,
yeah, go for it. Go talk about
here
last
we
game.
go. All right, here's the undisputed reigning National World Regional Series champion Boston Red Sox, who last year finished 97-65. Quiet offseason from them. They re-signed Mike Napoli, who was a big part of that World Series run last year towards the end. Signing Chris Capuano for 1 year, $2.25 million to add some depth after Ryan Dumpster takes the year off. Signed Grady Sizemore, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, to 1 year, $750,000 contract, and incentives can take that up to $6 million. Obviously, they lost Jacoby Ellsbury, lost Jared Saltalamacchia, and in order to replace that, they signed AJ Przinsky. Steven Drew, they're going to lose him. Most likely, he's still unsigned right now. And so they also signed Edward Mujica for 3 years, $9 million. And I think they just gave David Ortiz an extension yesterday. Am I
Yeah,
right?
a couple days ago, 1 year. So they tacked on an extra year to his contract,
Yeah.
and he has 2 years of vesting options, which he's gonna get. They're both just like play 95 games or something stupid like that. So he got a pretty big extension. But I guess I'll talk about this team because I have a lot to say. Because they're my favorite team, of course. The Boston Red Sox. Very quiet offseason. A team that's coming off a World Series victory, so obviously any complaining that I do about them is kind of look like I guess being spoiled, so to say. But I do have some not gripes with this team, but I didn't love the way they went about their offseason. I think what happened with this team was after they blew it all up at the end of 2012 and signed guys like Napoli and Victorino and Dempster in the offseason the following year. I think they were kind of planning for this like 2 to 3 to 4 year type of transition period. They have one of the stronger farm systems in baseball with guys like Xander Bogaerts, Henry Owens, just to name a couple. Jackie Bradley at the time was seen as a top prospect. Matt Barnes, Alan Webster, Ruby Delaware. I mean, they have prospects out the wazoo. And I think what they were kind of planning on doing was staying relevant for a couple of years, waiting for some of those young guys to come up. And I think the plan was those guys are going to take them kind of to the next level and become that World Series contender. And I think what happened last year was certain guys played out of their minds, like Daniel Nava, who just became I don't know a really good player. I guess I'll just keep it at that. Buchholz was one of the best pitchers in baseball when he was healthy, which I don't think anyone expected. They got a crazy, rebound season off of John Lackey. Dubront stepped up when he needed to. He had a stretch of like 17 straight quality starts at one point over the summer. He carried that rotation for a while along with Lackey. They had guys like Victorino hit 294, even though he came off a season ending like 220. Basically, it was a lot of overachievement with this team last year, and it led to a World Series victory. And I think what this offseason says about them is just because they won 3 years early, they're not diverging off of that plan of being patient, not signing big-name players, keeping it to low, kind of contracts that, you look at a 3-year, $39 million contract. If that doesn't work, it's not going to be a big deal because it's off your books in 2 years. So I think they took that kind of, I guess, they took the same approach in 2012 that they did in 2013 heading into the offseason, which was just kind of stay patient with their plan. And you can make the argument that maybe that's not smart when you're coming off a World Series victory. They certainly, I think the thing with this team is they didn't get any better. And I thought, watching the playoff run last year, I thought they caught every possible break that they could have. And I don't even know if they were the best team in baseball last year. And I think you play that playoff run out again, they probably win it, I don't know, 2 out of 10 times or something. That a lot of the time that's how it works. Not the best team doesn't always win every year, and that's the beauty of sports. But at the same time, they didn't get any better, and I don't think this is going to be the best team in baseball or whatever like that. Which I guess you can look at it one way as it's being smart, not kind of diverging off of that plan. But at the same time, you have a group of guys that just won World Series. You can get to that point. It's so hard to get to the point where they got last year. And I think Red Sox fans my age take that for granted because obviously it's the 3rd World Series title that I've witnessed since starting to follow the team when I was like 6 or 7. And
Lucky.
I think... and I think sometimes people take that for granted and people, and I understand the sense of being patient, but at the same time, it's so hard to get to where they are right now. And that's being one of the upper echelon teams in baseball. And I think it's hard to just look at that and take a patient approach to it. Maybe it's the smart thing to do, but it's obviously not the one that I don't think any Red Sox fan wants them to do. You look at this team; they're not going to get any better at any spot. I don't even think Xander Bogaerts going to be that much better than Steven Drew was last year. Drew, although got so much crap for being terrible in the playoffs and was kind of throughout the year just this mild-mannered, boring, good defensive shortstop, which just like his brother, kind of went under the radar, but had a pretty good year for them last year. Bogaerts this year is probably going to hit, I don't know, 10 points higher. He might hit 260. He might give you a 780 OPS and hit 20 home runs or something, maybe even like 15 home runs and, I don't know, 35 doubles. That's an upgrade over Drew, but it's not by much. And I think other than that, they're not going to get any better at any other spots. Maybe they get more production at third base this year if Middlebrooks has a better year. But they're not going to get Ellsbury production in center field. I don't think Buchholz is going to do what he did last year. Maybe you get some extra production out of the rotation. I just don't think it's a team that got better. I don't think Przinski is going to be better than Jared Saltalamacchia. And it's just a team that didn't get better, and I don't think they're gonna win another World Series this year. I don't even think they're gonna. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they really fell back to like an 86 to 87 win ball club, just because they didn't get better and they overachieved like crap last year. And I'll let you talk in a second. I know I've kind of been hogging the time here, but one.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm enjoying this.
One final thing I just want to bring up is I think it was after the Game 6 of the World Series, and I didn't see this live because I was actually at that game, so I didn't see any of the post-game presser stuff or anything like that. But I remember seeing this after probably the day after something, and watching a lot of that stuff on my computer or whatever. I think John Henry was interviewed after it, and he talked about how the team this year, and he was very honest about it. He said that they have this like supercomputer that runs a zillion simulations for the seasons or whatever, and I think the Sox averaged out as like an 86 win ball club last year is what the supercomputer thought they should have been. Now obviously computers aren't perfect; they don't account for things like chemistry and character, which was two staples of the team last year. So. The point is it's not an overly talented group, and if they come back to reality this year, which I think they will, and they didn't get any better, then that computer simulation is probably going to spit out an even smaller number this year, which is hard to believe, just based off of what they did last year. But at the same time, I just think it's a team that's going to be worse off than last year. I don't think they're going to be. I could see them winning 89 games and being outed in the first round. Kind of like they were in 2005. I mean, it's a team it's a group that's shown that they're not afraid to, they're not sentimental about things. You look at the 05 team after they won the World Series in 04, they got rid of Derek Lowe, they got rid of Johnny Damon, they got rid of Pedro Martinez, they brought in all these new faces like Matt Clement. They're not sentimental about things like that, and I don't think they're gonna kind of wind off course of their long-term plan just because they peaked early and ended up winning early, so to say. I think that was kind of their approach to this offseason. They're staying patient. They're staying on terms of their plan, but I think that's going to cost them in the short term. Now, maybe that's not a bad thing, and maybe having a season of an 88-win team or whatever is not a bad thing for the long term. But I guess I'm not saying if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just kind of saying I think that's what's going to happen this year. But finally, Ryan, what do you think of this team?
Yeah, I completely agree with you on pretty much everything that you said. That was just a really good cover about this team, but like you said, this team last year just seems like everything just kind of fell into place. Everyone had the season that they needed to. Obviously, Nava just came out of nowhere. Lester and Lackey got their stuff back together. Buckles had a really good, at least first part of the season until he got injured. So then the PV trade and, everything else that happened. Victorino also getting back on track. David Ortiz and Napoli. Obviously, you were so low on Napoli last year, and he sucked. Obviously,
I hated that signing, but it worked.
Yeah, it paid out in the end. Obviously, this team has a ton of chemistry, fear the beard, and all that stuff. That's really cool stuff to kind of see on a team, and I really think that helped them get that World Series, just how close-knit this group seemed to get last year. So, just like you said about the Steven Drew, the possible upgrade with Xander Bogaerts. This spring, Bogaerts in 227.
Yep.
So, and then also Jackie Bradley Jr. this spring hitting 173. You said that Sizemore started in the season, right?
Yeah, and I have a Sizemore thought, which I'll get to after you're done talking.
All right, yeah. I was just going to say really quickly, obviously Sizemore came out of, not really came out of nowhere, but came up in spring this year. They signed him. He's finally going to be healthy, it looks like so far. and he's performed really well. I'm actually really glad to see that. I like Grady Sizemore as an Indian. I really think that he's deserving of this opportunity to get that. So, and obviously, it looks like a giant upgrade over Jackie Bradley Jr. So, what do you have to say about Sizemore?
Yeah, two final thoughts, and I'll touch on Sizemore in just one moment. Another point I want to reiterate with the whole they overperformed and they exceeded expectations and kind of hit their stride and everything went right for them last year, so to say. They won, like, I don't know. First of all, they had 12 walk-off wins or something stupid like that, and they also won so many games off of blown saves before they figured out the closure thing with Koji Uehara, who's another guy who's going to come back down to earth. There's no way he's going to give you a .6 whip or whatever again. So I think that's just another sign of things. They're not going to win another 15 games off of blown saves or whatever the hell the number was last year. So that's just another way to think the team's going to come back to reality this year. But the Sizemore thing has been a big debate. It's pretty much all I ever hear on talk radio these days about with the whole spring training is Sizemore or Gomes and Ortiz bitching about whatever. The Sizemore thing is interesting. You got a 1-year major league contract with $750,000 guaranteed. It's got incentives up to $6 million, which is just all playing time incentives. And it's just an interesting thing because I think he's gonna win. I mean, if he makes it through this week, he's gonna win the starting job. He's just playing like
I don't
5
know
games.
about that.
No, yeah, if he gets through.
Well, I mean, with his injuries.
Yeah, Ryan went through some Grady Sizemore phases in Cleveland, but nonetheless, yeah. So if he makes it through this week, in which he's playing like 6 games in 7 days, he's going to be the opening day center fielder. John Farrell came out and said it's going to be either or. They're not keeping both on the roster, so Bradley likely is going back down to AAA. Assuming Sizemore makes it through the week healthy, which all signs point to that he is. He just hit a home run today, like a 2-run home run. He's hitting .303 as of what's today? Tuesday. So he's hitting .303 in the spring. He's looked great. He's looked like an above average center fielder at this point. This goes back to my long term plan type of thing. What I think is going to end up happening with the Sizemore thing is Bradley's a guy that hit. He had an 850 OPS in AAA last year. I think they still think he needs more seasoning. I think the organization thinks another half year in spring training or in AAA is not going to hurt him. He's still young. He's only 23 years old or something like that. So it's not like they're going to be losing out on some of his better younger years, and it's not like he's going to peak right out the gate, so to say. So I think they're not concerned about that too much. And how I think this Sizemore thing is going to play out, because they gave him that major league contract, so I think all along they thought he was going to be okay. In worst case scenario, they put him on the DL and they give Bradley the full-time job. The way I see the Sizemore thing playing out is he plays this year. He plays 120 games, something like that. He's not gonna go 162. And whether that be just because they want to give him off days once a week or something like that, or he probably will get hurt at some point. I mean, it's kind of not inevitable, but it's pretty predictable, I would say.
It's just the way he plays. He's just all out.
Yeah, and he's on a 1-year contract, and I think the way it plays out is if they see signs out of Bradley in those, I don't know, he's probably going to play maybe a third of a season, maybe a 2/5 of a season in center field, and if they see signs of improvement out of him, then I think they let Sizemore go at the end of the year and they move on with Bradley, which goes forward with that long-term plan that I talked about. And then obviously, if they really think Bradley's going to become a bust, then maybe they just, try to re-sign Sizemore at the end of the year. And this is all assuming that Sizemore plays well and kind of plays like he's playing in spring training, which is another thing. He hasn't played a full season since, 2009 or something like that. So who knows if he can, play that full season. But anyway, I've rambled on long enough. Let's move on to the offseason grade. I'll go first. I give the Red Sox a C. I guess because I can see both sides of the argument, the whole long-term, short-term plan thing. I think, it might have been smart. I think they've almost, been a little bit too patient, and they've been, kind of staying the course with this long-term plan almost to a fault, because if you have a World Series contender group like this, you want to kind of capitalize on that as much as possible. But at the same time, the Red Sox have never been sentimental about things. They pretty much blew up the 2004 team shortly thereafter, after they got rid of Pedro, Lowe, Damon, all those guys, and brought in a bunch of new players. And then it worked out. They turned the team around, won another World Series 3 years later. So, and then really after the 2008 2009 seasons, they were not sentimental about the 2007 team either. It's an ownership group that's shown that they're not, that they're not going to kind of they are going to stay the course, no matter what their plan is. So, I can see both sides of the argument. I think it was kind of a quiet offseason, which I don't think you can give them really positive grades because I don't see kind of the positive side of this offseason, so to say, at least in the short term. So I'm going to go with AC.
My offseason grade for this team, I gave him a C. I like the Edward Mujica signing for 3 years. Obviously, he can be there for a couple more years. Pretty cheap option as well. Solid guy. Also, Grady Sizemore, that's going to become a bargain contract, I think. Obviously, if he can actually produce this season, stay healthy, which is the major issue, staying healthy, as I know firsthand. If he can hit really well this season, he's going to be great for this club. But I'm going to give him a C for this offseason.
All right, and we'll go into the over-under. I guess I'll go first. The over-under on this team is 88, which is a whole 9 wins lower than last year. And I actually think they're going under. Another thing that I didn't really touch on with everything going right for them was the injury bug. And I think some of that catches up to them this year. They stayed so healthy throughout last year, except for Buchholz. They got almost a full season out of Ellsbury. They got close to a full season out of Victorino. They just stayed healthy throughout the year. They had a guy like Ortiz coming off of an Achilles injury who, played almost every game after he came back in April. I think the injury bug maybe catches up to them this year. I think the team got worse again, like I said, time and time again. And I just think it's a team that, like I said, I can see them, I almost want to take the even, like you said earlier with the Rays. I think this is an 88-win team. Something along those lines, maybe sneak into the wild card and be out in the ALDS. That's kind of how I see this season approaching. Or I see how that's how I see this season playing out. So I'm going to take the under, and I think they're playing such a tough division that it's going to be tough to repeat a 97-win performance. But Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm taking the under in this one as well. Obviously, a couple points like you said, tough division. This division got generally better this season, except for the Blue Jays. But I just think that competing with this division, there's no way you're even going to get to 95 wins this year. I think the winner of this division is going to be more around 93, 94, and I think all these teams could definitely be in at the end of the year. But like you said, I want to take the even as well, but I just can't see this team as only winning 87 games. That'd be a 10-win decrease from last season, but also, like you said, everything kind of just fell into place last year. Everyone had the season that they needed to have for this ball club. And I don't see that happening again. I'm taking the under though. Probably right about even though.
Yeah.
So hard. I just want to take that even so bad, but
Jesus. All right, so that pretty much does it for the AL East. That's gonna wrap up the division portion of our preview podcast. We do have one final podcast coming out tomorrow, Sunday, opening night, so to say. There's a Sunday night game, I think it's the Dodgers and the Padres, and then opening day is the Monday afterwards, which is very exciting. But we'll have our award predictions, division predictions, I guess, and playoff predictions too. I guess we'll pick who we think is going to make it to the World Series and win. All that good stuff. So that's pretty much going to do it. Ryan, why don't you take us out?
All right, guys. Pretty good episode. I really like talking about the Red Sox at the end. He knows a shit ton about the Red Sox. I'm interested to see his input about the Red Sox. But this is going to be a really fun division to watch this year. And I just want to say one thing. Hopefully Grady Sizemore can come back this year, have a good year. I think a lot of people in Cleveland really love Grady Sizemore, even if he signed with the Red Sox, because everyone in Cleveland hates Boston in general. We hate the Celtics, hate the Red Sox, just because they always knock us out in the playoffs every single damn year. So, but we're kind of used to being out of the playoffs anyways. So, but yeah, that pretty much wraps it up. We'll see you guys for our awards prediction tomorrow and our World Series predictions, playoff positions, or predictions, not positions. So we'll see you then, and I'll let you take us out, Ian.
All right. Thanks so much, guys. Hope you did enjoy. Ryan, I got this Grady Sizemore jersey over here for you. Picked it up mid-season. All right.
We want to.
All right. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed, and we're out. Peace.